Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to today's first story. I wasn't a religious man until very recently. I lived a very rough life at first. I was an orphan who moved from house to house, and eventually, like many of us, I ended up on the streets. I did all the wrong things one can do, from drugs to theft, and pretty much everything in between and beyond. I was on the run a lot. I had to do things I wasn't proud of to survive, and I was pretty much whom you would consider a dangerous criminal you didn't want near your children. During all of this time, I never really gave much thought to the idea of religion or God. I wasn't raised on it, and I never went to church as a kid, so it just wasn't my kind of deal. About 7 years ago, though, I got into serious trouble for the first time. I got arrested for drug dealing and I took 5 years of prison. I thought about trying to run away at first, but I got this epiphany that I wanted to change. I didn't like the way I was living or acting, and I saw prison as a good opportunity to rehabilitate and try to do and be better. It was a tough undertaking, but I had high hopes. I remember on my first day in prison, the other inmates kept asking me what I was in for, and it was like they were genuinely proud when I told them that it was drugs. Inside, each felony or penalty was like some badge of honor. The thieves were looked down upon unless they stole from rich people, and murderers were at the top of the food chain. The most common and popular group was the drug people whom I was with. I didn't like the way I felt in prison or the way the others treated me. I wanted to be better, and I didn't like how proud people were when it came to their crimes. So, I decided to change this up a bit. I made an oath to be a better person. I started right away. I became more involved with the library and books. I read about everything there is to read about in prison, and I was so proud of the work I was doing. I was like Tim Robbins in Shawshank Redemption, but without the accounting intellect. One thing was missing completely, though, and that was religion. I started getting more and more interested in religion and Christianity. I kept listening to all the religious people in prison, and I became an actual Christian with faith and everything. I was so used to the system in prison that when I got out a year ago, I struggled. Everything was too open and too free, which made things difficult for me. I didn't know what to do, so I turned to religion again as my only hope. I started going to this church in our town and hoping that things would go back to how they were in prison. I liked the idea of someone guiding me, so I clung to the pastor in this church. He wasn't young, so it was easier for me. He was around 55, so I trusted him. There's something about an older man of God that makes you trust him immediately. I started attending and he took notice. Over time, we started to develop conversations and a very pastor-attendee relationship. I told him about everything I did and my history, and he made me feel like it wasn't the end of the world and that there was hope and salvation yet for me. Trying to follow all the rules was tough. I decided on no sex before marriage as I should, so after some time of trying to find myself, I became interested in finding someone else too. I wanted a significant other to get married to, and I didn't want to do this through bars or dating apps. I wanted to do it the old-fashioned way, and a year later, I did. We both worked in the local tech store and we had a very small ceremony. After prison, I became very interested in tech and hardware, and after months of videos and trying to put things together, I finally found my calling in the world of laptops and phones. I didn't realize that my marriage wasn't very successful though, and it was clear that both of us only got married out of instinct, and we weren't very responsible. Despite this, I still fought and tried as much as possible to do my best and to make it work. The pastor always talked about marriage, adultery, and how we should always do our best to maintain our marriage and never fall into the activities of the devil. I always believed him, and it did make sense. I fought hard to keep my marriage afloat even if it felt impossible sometimes. The pastor helped me out greatly and we started becoming closer and closer, and he was always trying to give me advice and steer my life in a better direction. As we got closer and became more like friends, pleasantries went out of the window. Sometimes I would buy him lunch or pick up his dry cleaning. One time, though, he asked me to fix his laptop. I was going through a rough time, so we agreed that he would pay me for it. I went back home and started fixing the laptop. He had removed his password just in case I had to do any software work, and after a couple of days of checking and working, I finally got it done. I still had to make a backup of all the laptop's files on an external hard drive just in case we had to reset, so I would copy all the data back onto the laptop. I made sure not to look at any of the laptop's data or files, as that would be wrong and immoral, and I was going through a period of religion. I tried as much as possible not to see anything, and then I went back to the pastor at the church to give him back his laptop. When I got there, he seemed angry. He told me that I was too late and that 2 days was way too long to fix a laptop. I told him that I had to do a total check of everything and that I had other work to do, which is why it took so long. He took the laptop and opened it to check and asked me if anything was missing or deleted, and I told him no. He seemed to be in such a foul mood for some reason, and he was frantically going through the laptop and the files and hiding the screen away from me. When he was done, he thanked me and started walking away. I asked him about the money and he told me that I was too late and made him miss important stuff, so he wouldn't pay me. I kept telling him that we had a deal and that he can't do this, but he didn't care. He told me fixing the laptop is a small thing for all the good he has done me, and that I should be grateful for his help. He told me that at the end of the day, I was just a prisoner he took pity on, and that I should take what I can get. He seemed so arrogant and self-righteous, and he treated me so badly in that one moment, and I was pretty angry. I left the church and went to go sulk in a cafe by myself and see if I can do anything. I kept thinking about how I trusted him and he mistreated me, and the part about me being a prisoner pissed me off. Before, he kept talking to me about salvation and second chances, and that one line went against everything he had said before. All of a sudden, while I was going through my bag, I found the hard drive I had copied all of his data, and I got an idea. I thought if he treated me this badly, then I would find what he was so afraid that I would find. I hooked up the hard drive to my laptop and started sifting through his data. What I found next shook me to my core. I found a bunch of login details for dating apps and gambling sites. I went through the gambling thing first and found that he was actively participating in so much illegal online gambling and making a ton of money out of it. I got an idea to expose all of this to the other members of the church and show them that he wasn't as honest as he claimed he was, as he was always talking about gambling and how it's horrible and against Christianity. I realized that he was angry I was 2 days late because he lost money in online gambling because of it. It wasn't just the gambling that I found, though. The archives of the dating sites showed me chat histories with a ton of women. He was talking to so many women simultaneously, and some of the stuff they were saying was disgusting. There was sexting involved and a lot of plans for hooking up. In one of the chats, they were even planning on meeting inside the church at midnight. I was genuinely shocked and disgusted. I knew that he was married, but I never saw his wife and he never talked about her, so his having an affair with so many women was shocking. Worst of all, some of these women mentioned that they were married and he was telling them how to evade their husbands. He was pretty much using the whole pastor thing to attract them. While going through the chats and files, one of them caught my eye. It was Mrs. Tate, who was one of the most respected and honored members of the church, and pretty much a celebrity when it came to that small circle. She was married with 2 kids and everyone saw her as this perfect Christian lady and wife. They were both having an affair and discussing matters related to the church and the donations given to the church. I was beyond revolted to see them discussing the donations and how they took 40% of them for themselves and personal gains. I knew I had to expose all of this, but I also knew that I had to do it smartly. I didn't have the best cred with the members, and some of them still saw me as this ex-prisoner whom the pastor took pity on. I was afraid that they wouldn't believe me or that the pastor would claim that all of this was fake. I had to play a clever game. I first compiled all of this evidence and printed it. I was going to make packets and send them out to the members of the church in secret, so they wouldn't know who sent them. I would eventually reveal myself in the church itself, but I wanted to rile everyone up first. I printed everything and waited. I wanted to meet with the pastor's wife, but I couldn't find her. I didn't know her name or anything, and even when I looked through Facebook, I couldn't find her. Nobody else knew who she was and nobody knew why she was such a secret that he kept hidden. Eventually, I gave up and decided to just go on with my plan and hope to find her later. My first step in the plan was to find all the women he was having affairs with. After doing a lot of digging, I found that all of them went to the church, which made it even more disgusting. Most of them were married and had good reputations in our town. They lived the perfect suburban life, so instead of sending the packets to them, I sent them straight to their husbands. I found out where they lived, and at night I left the packets as mail directed to the husbands, not the wives. I thought that they would give them to the husbands directly without opening them, and it seemed to be working. In the next sermon, several of these women were absent. I could tell that the pastor looked worried and he kept glancing at their seats the whole time. I was way in the back, observing everyone's behavior. This was step 1. Step 2 would be all-out exposure. I planned on giving everyone in the church the evidence, and I waited for the perfect moment. Before the next sermon the following week, I snuck into the church early and hid the packets under the benches. I made sure there was enough for everyone who would be present. I made sure I was out of sight, and the pastor started giving his sermon. Ironically, it was about the dangers of adultery. He kept going and then I interrupted. I went up on stage and took the mic from him. He was confused, and then I pushed him aside and started telling everyone the whole story. He kept trying to interrupt and take the mic, but I kept pushing him aside and going on. I told everyone about the affairs and the gambling and that he was a liar and hypocrite. The crowd started huffing and was waiting for the evidence, so I gave it to them. I told everyone to look under their benches and they would find evidence of what I was talking about. They took it out and started going through it and the sounds of shock were beautiful. People started yelling and cursing and started getting out of their seats. On the front bench was Mrs. Tate, who was trying to hide her face but everyone was staring at her. Her husband slapped her right across the face and she sat down crying, while her husband made his way to the stage to get to the pastor. The pastor tried to run, but I grabbed him. I told him this was his penance for mistreating me and making me feel worthless. I told him that he was a hypocrite and that I wasn't just an ex-prisoner that he took pity on. I told him that he just made a ton of enemies and that the husbands of the women he was having an affair with were all waiting for him. Mrs. Tate's husband grabbed him and started beating him up, and everyone tried to break them apart, until the police showed up among all the chaos that was happening in the church to see what was going on. The police broke up the fight and both the pastor and Mrs. Tate's husband spent the night in jail. The news spread all over town and it was a big controversy that made it to the Daily News. The pastor became under investigation for illegal gambling and fraud. A town meeting was held in the church 2 days later, and a bunch of people attended to see what would be going on. The mayor went up on stage and dropped a bomb. She apologized to everyone and started explaining. She revealed that she was the pastor's wife and that they always kept it a secret but that they were now divorced. She told everyone that she was as shocked and disgusted as everyone else and that her husband's actions could not be condoned. She told everyone that her husband had been fired from his position and that the church will be going through changes and renovations. She apologized to everyone again. In the crowd, I could see the women whom the pastor had an affair with. They were with their husbands and their husbands kept dragging them and treating them badly. They came to me and first thanked me for telling the truth, but they wanted to know where the pastor was, as they had unfinished business with him. I told them that I didn't know, but that the pastor was already under investigation for illegal gambling, and that he would get what he deserved. I knew where to find the pastor though, over by the lake. This was his favorite spot. I found him over there just sitting down doing nothing. As soon as he saw me, he looked down. I told him that he is getting what he deserved and that he had absolutely no reason to treat anyone this badly. I told him that he was far from a religious man and that he didn't deserve his position as a pastor. He told me that he had a court hearing for illegal gambling and that he was facing 6 months in prison. I told him that karma was real and that when he gets out, he better find someone to take pity on him for being a prisoner. Now, here is the end of our today's story, and I hope you guys are enjoying my content. So before leaving, you guys can share your thought in the comments section about that asshole pastor and the revenge OP took on him. Also, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more revenge stories.